Yes, so today's series of our first edition of Storytime, I will be discussing the tips and guides to how a girl just like me can conquer life. Either if it's how to ace an interview, change a tire, talk to a guy, and many skills that has to do with life. Because I honestly want young girls to understand and to know that it's okay if you may not know right away, but it's also okay to also learn a couple things along the way. Yes, so today's discussion, we're going to be talking about how to apply for a job. Yes, and applying for a job can come in many factors. But first off, it's important to learn and to know the exact job that you want and exactly your location, where you are. Location matters, as well as how you are able to maneuver within the job circuit. So what you will also need a place you would like to work. You'll also need to learn or know a place you would like to work, a job application and or resume, along with a cover letter, and a telephone so that you can follow up on your job applications, a computer or tablet with internet access, and the time that's required, it varies because sometimes applying for a job can take longer. And I will be placing actual writings as to how you can go forward with this, instructions within this video. So step number one is the most important. The first thing that you're going to need to do is contact the employer. So what you can do is on the company's website, check for available job openings. And if the employer is a smaller company or is run by someone you know, consider inquiring in person about any job openings. And this could either be if you're interested in working in a department store or a boutique or a fast food joint. Definitely observe and know who you should actually speak to, because let's say if your mom knows someone or if a friend knows someone who can hook you up with a gig, it's important to have those contacts, because not only will it speed up the whole job process in terms of getting you hired, but it will also help you to at least know that, okay, I have support here. And also, if there are opportunities available, clarify how to apply, because some employers require applications to be submitted online, while others prefer you drop off the application in person. And most department stores such as TJ Maxx and sometimes Ross for Less and Home Goods, most of them, based off my experience, they do offer in-person applications. And to also go along with that, you must be sure to write down the name of the hiring manager so future correspondence can be directed to the appropriate person. Because the last thing that you want is for someone else to get your application, especially if the contacts that you were referred to is there, because you also want to make sure that you're actually getting where you need to go without getting tossed about and your application not getting to the correct person. That's another tip that you really need to understand, is that when you want your application to get to the contact that will actually get you work, you want to be very careful as to how you go about your application. So that's step number one. So step number two is contract a resume. So if necessary, prepare a resume and cover letter to include with the submission of your application. And there's several platforms that you can create your resume. You can create a resume on Canva, canva.com. That's where you can create graphics as well as photos for social media and everything like that. But they also have resume templates where you can create a professional resume that will impress your future employer. And even Microsoft Word, within the actual software, they do have resume templates, because most importantly, first impressions matter. If your actual resume is not up to par, that can also leave a bad impression on a future employer, so remember that. And step number three is all about filling out an application. because you don't want to fill out a resume without knowing exactly which job you're looking at, because a resume is also dictated on your skills as well as the actual job that you want. So step number 3 is all about filling out a resume, whether if it's online. Complete all the required fields, your contact information, your educational field, and whether if it's on paper, write clearly with a pen. And we will go through all of that within our next video as to how to actually fill out a resume. So that's tip number 3. And tip number 4 is like unto tip number 3 is proofreading. Honestly, guys, this is so imperative. Proofreading, make sure that you edit and proofread your resume, cover letter, and application prior to submission to ensure they are free of errors. Because the last thing that you want to do is put an I within your name and it's really an A. And the last thing you want to do is spell the word free as in F-E-E when it's really F-R-E-E, if you know what I'm saying. You honestly want to make sure that you don't make those small grammatical errors, because what that tells to the employer is that you're not taking this seriously. You're not taking the process seriously, and they're not going to be inclined to want to hire you. And step number 5 is submit your application. Once you've already contracted your resume, fill out the application, proofread, now it's time for you to actually submit the actual application. And how you do that, it could either be whether if it's online, click the submit button after you've finished completing all of the fields within the actual application online. And if it's on paper, turn in your completed application in person. But number one thing, do not send your mother in as your messenger. No one can place in your application but you, especially if it's in person. If it's online, I don't recommend it, but there's more of a leeway if someone else applied for you. There's more of a leeway. However, it is recommended that you yourself apply, just as courtesy of you actually taking the job seriously. But never send in a relative to submit in your resume if it's in person. And that's step number 5. And the final step is number 6, and it's like unto anything else. And this is what I always tell my friends or even myself. Even after I apply online for any work, I follow up. And within several days after submitting your application, please call the employer and ask to speak with the hiring manager, specifically the hiring manager, because that's the person that you'll actually be speaking with upon being called for an interview. And also confirm that your application was received and reviewed. That's one of the first questions that you should ask, other than the fact of introducing yourself, your name, as well as your reason for calling, and also let them know that you are just calling to see if your application was received and reviewed. And also be prepared to answer the hiring manager's questions and be willing to come in for an in-person interview. Whether if you live further away from your work, if you're really interested in getting that job, definitely be willing to drive further than you want to. But also, if there's work closer to where you live, definitely seek that out, either if it's at a department store, a hospital, a fast food joint. Definitely be vigilant in following up, but also know exactly how you want to proceed with the whole process. Yeah. And also a little fun fact before we move on to our next lesson as to how to fill out an application. Did you know that posting your resume online with a major job site is not going to be good enough? Because on average, about 500,000 resumes are posted on top job sites each and every single week. But the best way is to actually step in front of a job opening and line, especially if, let's say, if a company's opening is having open interviews. Go to the open interview, because that's the most effective way that you are actually going to guarantee work if you're actually vigilant in going in person to actually see if they're hiring, and it actually speaks volumes to your employer that you're actually interested in the job. And most importantly, guys, just breathe. Don't feel anxious when you're going in for an interview, and we will talk about how to conduct yourself on an interview on our next video lesson. Don't feel pressured to be perfect. Just be yourself. Because the number one thing is, a good employer can always sniff out a fake. They can always sniff out somebody who's trying to be something that they're not. So be at ease, suave, and have fun.